Chapter 3. Several hours later. Kramer High School. At Charles Kramer High School, the hand on the classroom clock ticked slowly. Too slowly for Zack. Looking at the clock, the second hand just seemed to move in slow motion. Tick, tick, tick. This lesson would not end any sooner while he kept looking at it. Zack was bored. The lesson was boring. School was boring. His teacher was boring. The boring second hand on the boring clock was going so boringly slow. When would this lesson ever end? The fuzzy classroom window looking out to the corridor went dark as someone approached Class 12. Zack watched the handle turn and a door opened. Walking into the room was a man whom Zack had never seen before. "What can I do for you?" asked Zack's teacher. He asked to speak to her, and she left Darren Black to look after the class while she went into the corridor to chat with the man. After a few minutes, at least that's what it felt like to Zack, Ms. Norfolk came back into the classroom and asked Darren to sit back in his seat. She sat down in her chair and stared silent for a moment, staring out of the window in a daze, collecting her thoughts and deciding how she should deal with the information she'd just received. After a moment, she stood up, facing the students. "Children, put down your pens and stop what you're doing. Jenny Taylor, you too." Jenny turned around and stared at Ms. Norfolk. "I've just been told that the dining room is already in use today, so we can all eat our lunch in class. Those of you who have hot lunches, you will eat in here too." The children smiled and chattered to each other. This was a marvelous opportunity to enjoy food in class, an opportunity usually saved for special days, like the last day of term or non-school uniform days. In excitement, the volume of chatter rose, and Ms. Norfolk clapped her hands to attract their attention. The children quietened and listened to what she had to say. "Lunchtime is still the same as normal. 12:15. So you all have 27 minutes to be getting on with your work." Zack sighed. 27 boring minutes left, he thought. Zack, fed up with the lesson, decided he needed to help the time go faster by doing something less boring, and with that, his hand shot into the air. "Excuse me, miss, may I go to the toilet?" She glanced again at her watch and grabbed one of the hall passes on her desk. "Okay, Zack, here's a hall pass." He left the classroom with the ticket in his hand and a smile on his face, then walked down the hallway towards the toilets. Reading the graffiti inside the cubicle, Zack smiled at the rude poetry and the "I was ear" comments, finished what he was doing, and then pulled a flush. He washed his hands and walked up the corridor when he noticed his friend Evan walking towards him. "Evan!" Zack called. "Happy birthday, buddy!" "Thanks, mate," he smiled, and then his face dropped. "Today is so boring." "I know, right? I asked to go to the toilet just to get out of class." "No way! Me too!" "Hey, where are the hall monitors?" They stopped and looked around. The place was quiet and no one was to be seen. "Good question. I can't see anyone. Although I saw something weird a minute ago." "What?" Evan asked. "A man came to our class, spoke to Ms. Norfolk, and afterwards she let me go to the toilet with no problems." "What? No dilly-dallying or straight there and straight back like usual?" "Nope." "That is weird." They chatted for a moment, and as they walked back to their lessons, they walked past the main hall doors. And just like that, As if the school bell had rung, the classroom doors flung open and students left their classrooms and all headed the same way towards the hall. As children walked past the hall doors and headed on down the corridor, curiosity got the better of Evan and Zack, and in the hustle and bustle, with no one to stop them, the boys investigated what was going on. Opening the hall door, they looked around in surprise to see rows upon rows of fold-up beds with medical equipment beeping and bags of solution hanging from wheeled metal poles. Several doctors were walking around with clipboards, electronic tablets, and stethoscopes. Zack scanned the room as someone approached them. "Hello, my name is Dr. Reese Leaf. Who are you here to see?" We, started Evan. "Knit nurse?" said Jack with a cheeky grin, but the doctors didn't seem to be in a joking mood. A woman in a lab coat with a stethoscope walked over and whispered into the doctor's ears. He stood back, picked up a loudhailer and talked into it. "Attention, everyone," he said, as it boomed across the room, grabbing everyone's attention. "We have over 100 incoming casualties and some walking wounded coming in. I need everyone to get to their stations. Arrivals will begin in the next few minutes." The boys watched in amazement as people rushed around, and Dr. Reese turned to them and said, "It's time for you to leave. We have planned for you to wait for your parents in classroom 6. Please go there straight away." He pointed down the corridor, and then, as the boys headed off, he picked up his electronic tablet and typed into it. Zack and Evan left the room and walked down the corridor towards classroom 6. When he got there, Zack noticed the tables were no longer out, and the classroom chairs were in rows. The TV trolley was at the front of the class. Children sat in chairs watching Eggy and Friends, a cartoon about a superhero egg and his best friend Tomato, who helped each other keep their veggie friends safe from the evil cheese monster. The cartoon, although aimed at younger children, was also popular among 10-year-olds. There was a knock on the door, and a woman wearing a blue smock and white apron asked to speak to the teacher outside the room. The children laughed as Eggy tipped some custard over the cheese monster, then watched as Tomato giggled. The cheese monster's cronies came in to fight with Eggy, and then the screen showed up bright red with white bold writing, "News Flash." The children looked at one another. "What?" said one child in frustration. "That's not fair," said another. "Flick the channel, Susie. You're the closest," said someone else. "Yeah, Susie. Turn over to a different one." She stood and pressed the buttons, but it was no use. The news flash was on all of them, so she sat down and watched, and they waited. "This is Brent J. Stock reporting from Channel 14 News at the Kistowich Dam, where residents have told us they see cracks in the dam wall. Let's go live to Kit Gursery on the ground." "Thanks, Brent. I'm here with Dan Eisling, who lives just down the road here in Kistowich. Dan, can you tell us what you saw?" "Yes, Kit. Well, my wife and I were sleeping. I sleep like a log, but there was a massive rumble, and it woke both of us up. At first, we thought it was an earthquake, but we don't get earthquakes here, so we quickly dismissed it." He motioned his arms as if shaking from an earthquake. "My wife, Helen, looked out of the window, and she just froze, unable to speak. I couldn't see very well, so she passed me the binoculars, and that was when we called the police. They told us to stay in our house, and that rescue would come along soon." He pointed his arm at the dam wall, with water now spewing out of it. The ground rumbled again, and some debris came loose from the wall of the dam. The water returned from a gentle spew to a sudden gush and turned the earth at the bottom of the dam into a mud soup. Another rumble interrupted them, and the camera switched to the eye in the sky once more. Stunned, the journalist didn't know what to say as the camera zoomed in on the crack, which had started to spider its way further up the wall. The cameraman panned the camera to show the viewers the dam, the crack, the water, the mud soup, the farmland, and then across the entire town. Earlier this morning, confusion and bad tempers rose, pushing the situation into something terrifying. An unidentified woman pulled out a firearm and let off a couple of shots, turning the evacuation from an orderly event into one of panic and pandemonium. Armed forces detained the woman, and paramedics have treated 2 people involved in a fistfight. The camera in the helicopter panned around, went slightly out of focus, and then zoomed in towards the dam wall. The children could see water coming out of the wall. "Are you getting this?" Brent asked. "I sure am," the camera operator confirmed, giving Brent a thumbs up. "I don't know if you can see this at home, folks, but I'm looking at substantial damage, and the water is flooding out from the cracks in the dam." The sound of army helicopters drowned out the news reporter's voice, and the cameras followed them as they flew overhead. The camera swung around from the dam, and the television showed the helicopters hovering, with the soldiers expertly sliding down the ropes, landing on the tarmac of the supermarket car park. "We now go live to Kit Gursery on the ground for more information." The camera switched from the eye in the sky to the ground crew, and there was a pretty blonde woman with a Channel 14 microphone in her hand to the right of the camera. She stood close to the dam, enough not to be in imminent danger, but also to get the entire wall into the shot. "Kid Gursery here, reporting for Channel 14 News at the Kistowich Dam," she began. "The dam has been here for well over 125 years. And last month, Channel 14 visited to share the town's anniversary of the dam. Now, those cheerful faces of celebration are turning to those of fear and dread as they struggle to come to terms with what is happening with the dam walls. The army has arrived to coordinate a full-scale evacuation of the entire town. As you can see behind me, the walls have sustained significant damage, and it's not clear if this is a terrorist attack or just a freak accident." The ground crew camera panned from the reporter to some coaches driving down the street, and then to the bottom of the ropes where the soldiers had started to gather. The men quickly stood in line, and another guy in front shouted something indistinct, then pointed in a few different directions, and the men followed their orders, peeling into different directions and knocking on doors to help start the evacuation. The Channel 14 helicopter hovered above Kistowich Police Station. Brent swept his hand through his hair to make it look tidy, but the wind outside wasn't doing him any favours. He adjusted his glasses. The cameraman focused his lens and activated the light and camera. "Welcome back to Channel 14 News. I am Brent J. Stuck, and this is a news update on the Hayworth Dam in Kistowich." Picture of Brent miniaturized into a small overlay in the top right corner of the screen. The rest of the screen showed a live feed from the helicopter, with a bird's eye view of some coaches driving through the town to collect a group of waiting evacuees. "As you can see, the army has got this evacuation underway, and these coaches will help to take the citizens of Kistowich up to safety so they can drain the reservoir and fix the damage to the dam wall." The coaches bore left down the main street, pulled into the car park and stopped, and a soldier picked up a loudhailer and started talking into it. The group of townsfolk formed an orderly queue and then filled the coach. A second coach pulled up behind the first. More people arrived, and they and the rest of the queue turned from an orderly evacuation into a mass frenzy, running, almost mob-like, towards the coaches, each person in a race to be the first to get a seat to safety as another rumble came from the dam wall. Zach's eyes were fixed on the television. He tried to pick out his mother, father, and brother from all the other pixels on the screen. Camera zoomed out. Brent's overlay picture disappeared, and the screen was a mass of hundreds of pixels, all fighting to get onto the coach. Zach squinted. He thought he saw his brother, then lost him among the crowd. The man that Zach was watching turned towards the camera, and Zach, realizing it wasn't Dylan, started scanning the rest of the screen to find them. Hundreds more people, leaving their houses, grouped up into the car park, and more coaches followed. "They just need to get on the bus," said one child. "And stop shoving," said another. The noise of the second crowd was almost deafening. People on the television started crying and shouting, and there were arguments and frayed tempers. Someone needed to get this situation in order. It was almost as if people on the television could hear what the children were thinking when suddenly a shot rang out. The camera zoomed in to show a soldier with his rifle in the air, then slowly lowering the weapon, aiming it at the crowd. The crowd went silent and no one moved. The soldier shouted something and people split up into groups. The women and children went on to the coaches first, followed by the men, and the second and third coaches were on their way, following the same route out of town and heading up the hill towards New Haven. One child stuck his hand out and shouted, "That's my mum!" A girl spotted her gran. All the children sat up and looked closely at the screen to see if they could see family members or people they recognized. The people on the TV switched to a split screen with Brent and Kit. The children watched as Brent and Kit discussed how well the evacuation was going, given the urgency, and that they'd both seen nothing on a scale like it in their entire careers. While it was exciting and scary for them, it all became rather boring for Zach and the other children. Kit and Brent chatted about the history of the dam. Zach had already been on the walks around the lake, and he knew all there was for a 10-year-old to know. There was a massive rumble on the TV, and both newscasters fell silent. The camera instantly swung to the dam, and the images of Brent and Kit faded from the screen. Crack in the wall turned into a split from the middle, expanding upwards like a spider's web. The helicopter moved to another position, and the camera panned from the dam towards the coaches. The children cheered as the coaches got to the top of the hill. The next few moments seemed like one of those horror movies, an end of the world scene as the wall disintegrated and the water just left the lake in the same way that a mug of tea loses all its water when it's dropped onto the floor in a slow motion moment. Within seconds, the camera wobbled as the shockwave buffeted the helicopter, and at that moment they could hear Kit calling out, "God, help us! Please help us!" from below. The children watched as the water hit the houses, carrying on with its rain of destruction. House after house, street after street, each street engulfed in water in seconds. There was a painfully loud hiss of static on the microphone, and Brent sat there in the helicopter, totally speechless, as Kit's communication ended. Millions and millions of gallons of water broke loose from the confines of the dam and thundered through the town. Nature's unimaginable force in an unending torrent. The camera feed cut off, and the picture on the screen showed the channel was experiencing technical difficulties. Although several miles away, the school and surrounding area felt vibrations as the water emptied from the dam and flooded the town. The noise was terrifying over the TV. Within moments, the ground started shaking at the school. The TV set wobbled. Children's chairs and tables shook, and the windows rattled. The classroom clock fell off and onto the floor with a resounding crash. The children cried. They had seen the first two coaches come up the hill, but what had happened to the other three coaches? The door flew open, startling the children, and Nurse Oshwen looked at the children. Some were crying, and some were in shock. Zack had tears running down his face. She looked at the television and switched it off. Another doctor entered. Nurse Tanya Oshwen, can you step outside for a moment, please? She followed the doctor, and after a moment the door opened again. Zack, your mum is here, and she'd like to see you. Zack's heart leapt. She was alive. He hugged the nurse, and they went to find his mum. Zack looked in amazement at the hall. He'd never seen the hall this busy, not even in a parent-teacher evening. No one had. Across the sea of people, he scanned through the hustle and bustle, and then his eyes met with his mother's. The bustling sounds changed to a background mumble as the surrounding people became a blur, and all he could focus on was his mum. His eyes scanned the room for a route and let go of Nurse Tanya's hand. Pushing through the crowds of people and bumping into Mr. Norfolk on the way. Throwing his arms around his mum, they wept uncontrollably and just stayed there for what seemed like about 5 minutes. Zack and his mum hugged a long, motionless hug. His mum whispered into his ear, I love you, Zack. I love you too, Mum. They hugged. Moments later, Dylan joined them. Where's Dad? Dylan asked. He's on another bus. I saw him on the front of the bus behind mine. The conversation stopped. Time ticked by slowly. But their father still didn't arrive. It had been several hours since the first and second coaches had dropped everyone off, and the darkness was making it harder for volunteers and rescue services to go out and look for buses 3, 4, and 5. Until tomorrow, at least.